Hello, I'm Tim Matthews, and this is Wild Pyrford. On the programme over the next few months, we'll visit local people who are making a difference to our environment. They may be keeping bees, they may be replacing their manicured lawns by introducing wild grasses and meadowlands. They might even be composting more than just vegetables at the end of their garden. Small steps that make a difference to our natural world. Follow us each month by keeping tabs on our website, www.wildpyrford.com. So, what's in store for this month's show? We'll be meeting someone who's turning quite a few acres that were once the greens of a golf course back into a natural wilderness that encourages biodiversity and the return of lost flora and fauna.
There's hundreds of butterflies here.
But we'll start our first programme by visiting Wendy Grimshaw, who's a great fan of natural ponds. I went along to meet her and find out more.
I think a natural pond is one that hasn't had anything added other than the wildlife that just finds its way there. Basically, I just dug a big hole and filled it with water, and everything just arrived of its own accord. Well, I've always wanted a pond because my parents had a pond and I've grown up with a pond, but I didn't want to have goldfish because my dad had goldfish and he spent the whole time worrying that the heron was going to strike.
Yeah.
So it's stress-free. If you have fish, then that upsets the balance. They start eating the newts and yeah, there's a bit of a struggle. So I think it's one or the other. I've got about 100 newts, dragonfly hatch, pond skaters, whirligig beetles. That's just the wildlife, and then I've got all the wild plants as well, water lilies and so on. So I encourage the rose bay willow herb to grow in my garden because that's very beneficial for insects.
What sort of birds do you have coming down to the water's edge?
Can you hear that blackbird singing? I get all sorts in the pond, and I have different birds like different levels of water. Some birds come and have a bath. Blackbirds particularly enjoy having a bath, and some birds timidly stand at the edge and lean over and have a little drink. That will be the pigeons. And then I get goldfinches who come round the edge. If you were going to build a pond, I would recommend making it as big and as deep as you can, because that attracts more wildlife, and in our country it's better with the winter weather.
How deep is this pond?
It's kind of up to here on me.
So it's a couple of metres. Well, it's a metre and a half, say.
Maybe a metre.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about algae? Is that an issue with a pond?
It can be. If the sun is shining on your water, it can build up, and then you might have to do what I do, which is get the family involved in a pond clearing day, which is what we did during the lockdown, and all the family got involved and it was quite fun.
So maintaining a pond, part of maintaining a pond is to clear it of algae.
Yeah, but yes, you do have to keep on top of the plants, because that reed in the middle, in 2 years' time it will be completely clogging underneath the water. You can't see it, but if you don't clear it out at least every 2 years, you'll be in difficulties. We've got lots of pond snails. We have frogs. My parents actually had a water snake. That's something I aspire to. And one day I did have 2 pairs of ducks arrived on my pond. I was very pleased about that until I realised they'd eaten all my dragonfly nymphs. It's great to have dragonflies and damselflies. I'm aware that they take about 5 years to develop in the bottom of the pond, and then one day they just climb out of the water, up the reed, and they very slowly emerge from their chrysalis. It takes hours for it to dry off. They dry their wings, and then they suddenly take off.
Where do they go?
Probably to find another pond or a mate. And that's it. And then they lay their eggs and it starts all over again. It's sad, really. If foxes did come and drink from my pond, I'd be very pleased, because that's all part of the ecosystem, and I would be pleased about that. In terms of benefits that the pond brings, I understand that we are being encouraged to have as many ponds as we can in this country, because there are fewer and fewer natural ponds. And so, yeah, with the wildlife decreasing, it's very important to try and have a pond in your garden if you possibly can. And it doesn't need to be big, it can be very small.
I was talking to Wendy Grimshaw about the benefits of a natural pond, and we'll be returning to the subject in a month when we meet someone who's just started theirs in a bathtub. Now, imagine turning a golf course into a wilderness, and a wild one at that. Well, that's the target that Joy and Akil Sashak have set themselves. Any rewilding will help the environment by attracting back flora and fauna that modern developments often chase away, including golf courses. Carol Mitchell went along to meet Joy in the middle of her wild meadow to see how the rewilding project is progressing.
Joy, we're standing in your wonderful wild meadow. Just tell me a little about the history of this and what it was before and how you've got it to where it is now.
So as far as we know, this area has been farmed for hundreds of years. So I'm assuming it was a farm where they grew crops. This is really good soil for growing in. 50 years ago, that's what it was doing. Then in the 1990s, most of the 100 acres that we now own was a golf course. And this was used by a horse, basically, who ate everything that you see.
So what have you done to get it back to a more natural state, what we see here today?
We've literally, well, we haven't done nothing because we have mowed it. So the seeds from the grass have already fallen. The yarrow is expanding year on year. We've got a lot of yarrow there. We've got corn cockles, lovely purple colour. And 2 years ago we planted this pinarium.
That's a big word.
Pine trees, basically. So most of this little area that you're seeing here has just literally happened by itself. We did plant corn flowers, which haven't taken, so they did once. Poppies did a once job. We have a lot of oxeye daisies. They come out very early, so you won't see any of those at the moment. So yes, we have planted, but this that you're seeing at the moment has just done itself. There are lots of long grasses, short grasses, lots of different sort of...
So this is a perfect example in this relatively small area of what is possible for nature, given the space to do what it needs to do itself. It's going back to the way it would have been maybe a couple of 100 years ago, maybe.
Absolutely, and it doesn't need watering, it doesn't need, it needs mowing once or twice a year, because otherwise the thorns and the thistles take over, or you put cattle or sheep on it. And I didn't grow up with cattle and sheep, so that makes me a little bit nervous. I'm happy to mow it.
But in terms of allowing this area here to rewild, it's a very light touch in terms of human interference.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we completely interfere with it, it won't be wild. We do. You can see a little dock thing over there, so we do have to keep on top of the docks if they suddenly take over. If the ragwort takes over, we may or may not have to do something about that. There are theories out there that say, you know, let the wild flowers, the flora, do what it does, and it will sort itself out. Unfortunately, with animals, we don't have that luxury. We don't have the top predators anymore. So, no. But you know, the flora is different.
The flora is different, and in terms of what the flora is doing naturally, how has that benefited biodiversity? Are you seeing an increase in insects, in pollinators, in birds? How is it all sort of becoming one story?
For sure, the insects have just ballooned since we've been here. I'd like to educate myself more on what we've got. All I can see is that when I go out, there are just a ton more insects and a whole load more different types of butterflies. And then yesterday I was walking around and there was a whole little flock of chaffinches just coming down, eating something, I don't know what, eating something, going off again, coming down. They're very, very noisy, chaffinches, but very beautiful. So a little flock of chaffinches were being fed by this.
You must be proud though, you know, obviously this is just part of one project in a bigger project, but in the short time that you've had this land, to see this biodiversity increasing is a real boost to what you're trying to achieve here.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's very satisfying.
Carol Mitchell was talking to Joy Sashak in the middle of a wilderness. So our first edition of Wild Pyrford draws to a close. A special thanks to Carol and of course to our contributors this month. If you're engaged in a conservation project or determined to arrest climate change by even the smallest of steps, then we'd love to hear from you. Email us at wildpyrford@gmail.com or visit our website www.wildpyrford.com. Until next time, I'm Tim Matthews, and this is Wild Pyrford.